And my final video of the day, I want to talk about something on Wolf Street and actually marketoracle.co.uk from a year ago, that one, the Market Oracle. Someone sent this to me in email because he said, hey, you were talking about that fourth cycle thing. You know, there's the four cycles, and the fourth one, is the worst one till everything resets or whatever. He's like, but have you ever heard of the condrative wave? Condrative wave, I think is how you pronounce that, based off the guy's last name who discovered it. Another cycle, which by chance is, I guess, about to happen or started happening as of 2016, maybe. I'll get into the article in a minute. But to give you a little pre-bonus, Wolf Street, oops, this isn't supposed to happen in a rosy credit scenario for the first time in the U.S. since the financial crisis. What might this be? He says, let's forget for a moment the Fed, its rate increase flip-flopping and what that might do in theory to the economy. And let's look instead at what companies are actually doing, how they're responding to the environment they find themselves in, because now something is happening that we haven't seen since the trough of the financial crisis. Credit growth. No matter what has been the mantra, it could never be enough. If companies borrow more from banks, they'll use that money to invest in productive activities or equipment and grow. That's the theory, and it would move the economy forward. So total loans and leases at all commercial banks have soared 40% since the bottom of the financial crisis to $9.13 trillion in the week ending February 15th, according to the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve, and are 25% above the peak of the prior credit bubble in October 2008. But since the week ending December 7th, 2016, they have declined a smidgen. So why is that all-important loan growth flattening out after soaring for so many years? And how do companies fit into this? Of the of the many categories of loans and leases, one category stands out as an indicator of what companies are doing: commercial and industrial loans. They edged down to $2.1 trillion in the week ended February 15th. That's where they'd first stood in October 19th last year. After ballooning relentlessly for 6 years straight, C&I loans have now been stalled for 4 months in a row. Keyword, 4 months in a row. Since the bottom of the financial crisis, there have been periods of 4 or 5 weeks of stalling C&I loans, but they were invariably followed by robust loan growth immediately afterwards. So these C&I loans have been booming over those years. But this period from October 19th until now is the first extended stretch of stalling C&I loans since the bottom of the financial crisis. The chart shows C&I loans at all banks going back to 2012. Note how the 4-month stagnation period is unique during this time period, which, let me just give you a little look-see at that, if you will. You can see no other period on this chart do you see this length of a straight line across. Not looking good. C&I loans are a sign of what businesses of all sizes are doing, from the small company that is borrowing to buy a piece of equipment to the largest behemoth that is funding its inventories. These loans show whether companies in aggregate are expanding their investment or pulling in their horns. In that manner, C&I loans are tightly connected to the real economy. They grow when the economy grows, and they decline when the economy declines or heads south. And let's look at this one. The chart shows C&I loans going back to 1988, covering the last 3 recessions. The turning points are all circled in red. Isn't that amazing? If you were a betting person, would you bet that maybe, just maybe, we've reached a turning point? And it might be just as sharp of a turning point as we see here in 2008, possibly. I wouldn't bet on it. Wouldn't bet against it, I should say. The turning point during the financial crisis was unique, a sudden deep collapse in credit. The timing of a turning point may not be perfectly aligned with the beginning of a recession, but dang it, it's close. I think that speaks volumes. So I was talking about the other thing, with the 4-wave cycle, the last fourth wave, whatever. It's like roughly 80-year cycle. Each cycle, 1, 2, 3, and 4 are about 20 years apiece. Just did that video. But someone sent me this one and said, hey, this is it's not the same cycle, but it's actually similar, and it kind of points to the same thing. So this is my kind of thing. Okay, I've got one cycle over here that says, got a problem. Another different cycle, completely different math on that one. Got a problem here. And they point to the same time frame. Excuse me, hang on a second. Let me clear my throat. All right, so it says nature functions in cycles. Each 24-hour period can be divided into smaller cycles of morning, afternoon, evening, and night. The whole year can be divided into seasonal cycles. Similarly, one's life can be also divided into cycles. Cycles are abundant in nature. We just have to spot them, understand them, and prepare for them, because they happen whether we like it or not. How many times have you heard me say about cycles? The sun goes up, the sun goes down, the sun goes up. I give these stupid little analogy things all the time. Likewise, economic experts have noticed that the world also follows different cycles. An important pioneer in this field was the Russian social economist Nikolai Kondratiev, also called Nikolai Kondratiev. What? Also called, it's the same name. It's the same name. A relatively unknown genius. So what is this thing? Geniuses have been known to defend their principles and beliefs, even at the cost of losing their lives. They may die, but their legacy lives on, as did Kondratiev. He was an economist who laid down his life defending his beliefs. He was the founding director of the Institute of Conjecture, a famous research institute, which was located in Moscow. He devised a 5-year plan for the development of agriculture in Russia from 1923 to 25. His book, The Major Economic Cycles, was published in 1925, in which his policies were in stark contrast to that of Joseph Stalin's. As a result of this, Kondratiev was arrested in 1930 and given a prison sentence. This sentence was reviewed, and consequently, he was executed in 1938. What a tragic loss of such a genius at only 42 years of age. He was executed because his research proved him right and Mr. Joseph Stalin wrong. Nonetheless, his legacy lives on, and in 1939, Joseph Schumpeter named the waves Kondratiev waves, also known as K-waves. So what are the K-waves? Investopedia defines the Kondratiev wave, or K-wave, as a long-term cycle present in capitalist economies that represents long-term, high-growth, and low-growth economic periods. The initial study by Kondratiev was based on the European agricultural commodity and copper prices. He noticed this period of evolution and self-correction in the economic activity of the capitalist nations and felt it was important to document. My kind of guy. Think like a scientist, act like a scientist, give the data, review the data, etc. Or maybe you review it first, then give it. Have a working hypothesis. It looks like I got something here. I do have something here. Share the data. Doesn't go against what our president or leader, Mr. Stalin, not necessarily socialist, but a dictator, doesn't like that. Off with his head. Thanks. You take a guy like a genius, guy figures this stuff out, shares it with the world. This is fantastic data. Don't like your data, kill him. Yep, fantastic. He noticed this period of evolution and self-correction in the economic activity of the capitalist nation, and he felt it was an important thing to document. These waves are long cycles lasting 50 to 60 years and consisting of various phases that are repetitive in nature. Now remember, he says they are divided into 4 primary cycles. Now, the other one I told you about the other day, that cycle, was roughly, and it did sway a little bit, but roughly 80 years. And each of those 4 were approximately 20 years, 20, 40, 60, 80. The last one, not looking too good, right? That's how it ended. So he has the spring inflationary growth phase, the summer stagflation or recession, autumn deflationary growth, plateau period, and finally the winter depression. That's what he called them. Those are the 4 stages. So number 1, spring inflationary growth phase. The first wave starts after a depressed economic state. With growth comes inflation. This phase sees stable prices, stable interest rates, and a rising stock market, which is led by strong corporate profits and technological innovations. This phase generally lasts for 25 years. Number 2, summer stagflation or recession. This phase witnesses wars such as the War of 1812, the Civil War, the World Wars, and the Vietnam War. War leads to a shortage of resources, which leads to rising prices, rising interest rates, and higher debt. And because of these factors, companies' profits decline. So speaking of this war cycle, didn't our president say he wants to add another 52 or so billion to the defense budget and quote, possibly more than that? It may be higher than that? Why would he want to do that all of a sudden? Nah, just for fun. 3, autumn deflationary growth or the plateau period. After the end of war, people want economic stability. While the economy sees growth in selective sectors, this period also witnesses social and technological innovations. Prices fall and interest rates are low, which leads to higher debt and consumption. At the same time, companies' profits rise, resulting in a strong stock market. All of these excesses end with a major speculative bubble. You starting to figure out what cycle we're kind of at the end of and what's about to begin? Winter depression, the 4th cycle. This is a period This is a period of correcting the excesses of the past and preparing the foundation of future growth. Prices fall, profits decline, and stock markets correct to the downside. However, this period also refines the technologies of the past with innovation, making it cheaper and more available for the masses. Accuracy of the cycle over the last 200 years. The K-waves have stood the test of time. They have correctly identified various periods of important economic activity within the past 200 years. The chart below outlines its accuracy. So I'm going to pull this up for you in case you want to go along with me. The K-waves, a schematic drawing showing the world economy over time according to the K theory or quantitative theory. Steam engine, cotton, railway, steel, electrical engineering, petrochemicals, automobiles, and then information technology. But if you notice, we're on the down part of the wave, right? PRDE, prosperity, recession, depression, and improvement. So if you look at one of the waves, which let's look at the first one in 1800 or so. Prosperity on the way up, recession at the very top starts to go down. Hang on, I got to get this phone call. Pause this real quick. All right, sorry about that. Had a phone call I had to take. And I said, well, since I kind of forgot where I was in this place, I'll just go ahead and have a couple slices of pizza while I'm at it. But I do remember prosperity, recession, depression, improvement. So down here, he says, no principles in the world is left unchallenged. Similarly, there are a few critics of the K-waves who consider it useful only for the pre-World War II era. They believe that the current monetary tools, which are at the disposal of the monetary agencies, again, such as the Fed, can alter the performance of these waves. There is also a difference of opinion regarding the timing of the start of the wave. So, in other words, there's definitely some wiggle room in here. But if you look at these, where exactly are we at? Spring, 1950, summer, autumn, winter is past 2000, and he says, to 2020 question mark, the bottom, as we head towards there, it's possible. And this is through October 2003, this one. Again, it points to later in the, actually the same exact time frame, 2020. So anyways, A closer study reveals that the cycles are being pushed forward temporarily. Any intervention in the natural cycle unleashes the wrath of nature, and the current phase of economic excess will also end in a similar correction. The K-wave winter cycle that started in 2000 was aligned with the dot-com bubble. The current stock market rise is fueled by the easy monetary policy of the global central banks. Barring a small period of time from 2005 to 7, when the mood of the public was optimistic, the winter cycle had been spent with people in a depressed social mood. The stock market rally from 2009 to 2015 will be perceived as the most hated rally and the one most laden with fear. Every dip of a few hundred points in the stock market starts with a comparison to the Great Recession of 2007 through 9. The mood excludes fear and disbelief that the efforts of the central banks have not been successful and are unable to thwart off this winter cycle as predicted by the K-waves. The winter is here and is reflected in the depressed social mood. How to weather out the brutal winter. In the last phase of the winter cycle from 2016 to 2020, which is likely to test us, the stock market top is in place, global economic activity has peaked, terrorism further threatens our lives, geopolitical risks have risen, the current levels of debt across the developed world are unmanageable, and a legitimate threat of a currency war occurring will all end with the Great Reset, he says. Gold will be likely to perform better during this winter cycle. Get in love with that yellow metal. It's the blanket which will help you withstand this winter. And again, the winter being the cycle. Conclusion. Cycles are generally repetitive forces that give us an insight into the future so we can be prepared to face it and prosper. Without excessive intervention, nature is very forgiving while correcting the excesses. But if one meddles with nature, it can be merciless during the correction. The current economic condition will end with yet another reset in the financial markets. Prices will not rise forever, and a correction will take hold eventually. Until then, we follow and trade accordingly. I will suggest the necessary steps to avoid losses and prosper from market turmoil when that unfolds, etc. Trying to see when this was actually posted. If there's a date. Yeah, that's right. It was a year ago. So August 17th, 2016. That's when he wrote this. This was the Market Oracle site. And again, it just, everything is like pointing. Everything is pointing to over-indebtedness, massive bubbles everywhere. And when I tell you and have told you, you are going to find the deals of a lifetime when all this goes down. I'm not kidding. And those of you who played your cards right, stack some metals, precious metals. Maybe you have some cash on the side, but even if you don't, you'll be able to sell those metals for a handsome return and go buy some other assets, whether you want to maybe get into real estate or something, and you decide, well, I've always heard people complain about owning houses and the tenants and rent and them destroying the houses, and I got to pay for everything. It's a little different if you own the property outright. When you're charging $1,300, $1,400, $1,500 a month for rent, and you own the house outright, and essentially the insurance and taxes, let's say, are $300 to $400 a month, and I'm talking average Florida property, $300 to $400 a month for taxes and insurance. You're pocketing essentially around $1,000. If you had 3 or 4 of those properties, that's a nice little return income, isn't it? And then at some point in the future, when you decide it's really time to retire, I don't want the rental income, I'm just going to sell all the houses. Get rid of it, take a nice lump sum payment. When everything clears up in the economy, if you will. When the next reset is done and over with and we get past that or whatever. You might just say, I don't want to mess with real estate. I just want to buy all my stuff outright. I own a house. It's paid for. I don't need a lot of money to live on, and I'll be fine anyways. I don't want to do all that stuff. Except have the silver and gold on the side to sell and make a huge profit for when this happens. I've always been on the opinion, I'm not here to make huge profits of gold and silver. I don't tell you, go get it because you're going to be filthy rich. It's only to protect your wealth. These items cannot go to the price of zero. It takes way more money to get them out of the ground. Nobody's going to work for free. And the mining equipment and the expense they have is insane, okay? Not only that, but you're going to have a flood of people figuring out my wealth is going down in my country's currency, whatever country you might live in. Gold, history, safe asset, silver, same thing, I want it. Which will, I repeat, will cause a bubble in the metals prices. And that's when you want to sell. And that, because of the declining dollar value, devaluations that have to come, it will not be absurd to see 100, 200, 300, etc. price silver. It is going to happen. Why? It's a mathematical certainty. Take care.